Ah, what a wonderful day to be in the Galar region. Oh, hey Hop, what's up?
It's time for my new legend to begin here with my
got my hands
Pokémon.
on some area.
Seems we're going to train even harder from now on.
All the dialogue in Pokemon games can get tiring. What if you wanted to jump into a world of adventure and discovery, but God said, here I'm gonna demonstrate how to catch a Pokemon, and sure, lots of the dialogue is genuinely good. Whether it's telling a good story, displaying good characterization, or just being funny. But when there's this much of it, it genuinely does get tiring, I don't care who you are. But some of this dialogue can be really interesting, not necessarily because of what it says, but rather through how remote it is. There's lots of customizability, variety, and possibilities in almost every aspect of Pokemon. The team you have, the moves on that team, the places you go, unless you're in Galar, and shockingly, lots of these possibilities and options can trigger unique dialogue that maybe like 20 people have seen ever, and even less of them actually read what it said. So let's look at words. In some specific games, namely Gens 4, 5, Sword and Shield and Scarlet and Violet, and BDSP, certain important trainers could talk to you during your battle with them. Now, in Gens 4 and 5, none of this dialogue was really missable. Fighting any big trainers, they usually tend to have a line when they first take damage or when they're down to their last Pokemon, pretty standard stuff. Damn, maybe people are right about too much dialogue, I can't even escape it in the battles. But when Sword and Shield and later Scarlet and Violet brought the in-battle dialogue back, things were pretty different. There was more of it. For starters, in a bunch of the fights, mainly against your many rivals and some other important battles like Leon and the AI Professor, there was some extra dialogue that would appear under more specific circumstances, with the most obvious being when you hit their Pokemon for super effective damage. Even if it's really just them saying, wow, you know type matchups, it's still neat, making the battles feel a tiny bit more personal. But this situational dialogue for playing the game correctly is just the tip of the iceberg. Some of them have lines for when they land a super effective hit on you, which is something that most people just wouldn't let happen. Critical hits rely purely on chance, most of the time, so it's pretty easy to miss that lots of characters have a line reacting to them. In many cases, commenting on how lucky you are. Avery of all people is a highlight here, with him claiming the fates have abandoned him. Damn, a dice roll just ruined this man's faith. And there's also Kieran during his champion battle absolutely seething over the fact you got a crit. And last for the shared in-battle dialogue used across multiple characters is calling out certain moves. Guess when these ones trigger? When a trainer uses a specific move, usually a signature move for their signature Pokemon, they'll do a little call-out, adding just a bit more impact to it. Lots of these are really standard non-specific tough guy dialogue. Like, Hop, I don't think I want to know what green power entails. But of course, and most interestingly, there's some way more specific dialogue only in certain battles under very particular conditions. Like, Hop of all characters has quite a lot of these, so sorry you will have to hear him talk more. Early on in the game, he actually keeps track of who won and lost the tutorial battle. And considering it's the tutorial battle of Pokemon Sword and Shield, you won't lose to him. And considering how easy most of these games are, I guess any kind of losing dialogue is kind of obscure, huh? Anyway, after the battle with Hop in front of Magnolia's house, he can say one of 4 different things based on which one of you won, and also whether or not you won in the tutorial battle. If it's your first victory against him, he'll remark about you getting back at him for before. If it's his first victory, he'll comment about how he's glad he beat you this time. And if you're terrible at the game and he wins both this and the tutorial battle, he'll start bragging about being undefeated. But sadly, since every fight with him afterwards requires you to win to progress the game, as hard as that might be on my heart, this small, neat detail ends up getting left behind, but it makes sense. And also, only in his battle in Motostoke, he has a line for when he hits you with a move that has no effect. Something that you would deliberately have to trick him into doing by switching out or something, considering the AI usually goes out of its way to avoid doing stuff like that. And it's especially weird because it's so early in the game where you'd have very limited options to make this actually possible. And on top of that, this is the only time any NPC reacts to dealing no damage, ever? Even counting Scarlet and Violet? Well, see, that's gotta make Hop a good character now, I don't make the rules. Raihan, of all people, has unique situational dialogue too. His gym revolves around weather, with him in particular running a sandstorm team. You know, because, dragon. And if you happen to directly counter a strategy by setting up your own hail or sun, he'll notice what you did and compliment you for strategizing. Hell, both options have him say a completely unique line too. Though it's weird how he doesn't say anything for Rain Dance. Not a Team Aqua fan, I guess. It's lost. Scarlet and Violet's unique situational in-battle dialogue is way more well-known though, mostly because it's just way simpler to activate, namely the interactions surrounding Ogerpon, of which there are several. During both Carmen and Kieran's first battles in the Indigo Disc, they'll react to her when you send her out, with Carmen being happy to see her again, even commenting on how Ogerpon must have missed her, and Kieran being pissed to see her again, now of all times. And on top of that, Ogerpon herself has some special dialogue too, specifically in the fight with Pecharunt during Mochi Mayhem. Okay, well, dialogue might be a bit much. When sent out in this battle, she'll yell out, Grandpon! Probably because she's angry at this thing for ruining her entire life. And what the hell, Pecharunt gets some dialogue here too. This time if you decide to send out any of the lousy 3, with it saying, Pecha-tra! Likely because it feels like it's being betrayed by the Pokemon it once considered its friends. Skill issue, I guess. The next category is something like fail-safes, or cheating counters, or never mind, categories are a stupid idea. Dialogue that's tied to events or situations that you most likely wouldn't encounter unless you went out of your way to see it, or in most cases, did something that you're probably not supposed to do. Wait, if Game Freak knows about my cheating, What else do they know about me? The two biggest cases of this probably come from Johto. In Cianwood City in Heart Gold and Soul Silver only, there's the infamous Gift Tentacool. Although the main draw is probably the Tentacool itself, the guy that gives it to you still has completely unique dialogue, saying how it must be so hard for you only having one Pokemon, and luckily he caught a spare Tentacool he was going to release anyway. Okay, never mind, this sucks, I didn't need to be pitied. The other big case in Johto comes from Claire, and this time only in the original Gold and Silver. After you beat her in her gym and she throws a temper tantrum, originally you went to the Dragon's Den not to talk to the elders, but instead to get the Dragon's Fang item. And since it's just a standard hell item that can be given to a Pokemon to hold, you could theoretically just trade the Dragon's Fang between games, completely skipping the Dragon's Den. And that awful music, Jesus Christ. Except you can't do that. Showing Claire a Fang before picking up the one in the den prompts special dialogue of her expressing her disappointment and calling you a cheater. Okay, has she seen her cousin's team? The Johto remakes actually do have one more case that's considerably more obscure. So at the gate between Goldenrod and Route 35, Randy, this is Randy, gives you a Spearow named Kenya who's holding a piece of mail. And you're given a small side quest to bring Kenya with the mail to another NPC on Route 31. But if you want, you can just take the mail off of the Spearow and give it to any of your other Pokemon for whatever reason. I don't know, I don't judge. And if you do this, the recipient will acknowledge that he doesn't know the Pokemon, yet he'll take the mail anyway. A pretty neat alternate outcome. And this also has the side effect of just letting you keep the Spearow if you want. Hey, I guess that's payback because in the Gen 2 games, he would just take whichever Pokemon was holding the mail. Damn, people were right. Team Rocket and Johto really is washed. The Hoenn games, or at least the ones in Gen 3, had the neat aspect of some gyms just being completely optional for a while. Namely, Brawly and Winona's gyms aren't actually required to progress the game, at least not until later on where the game flat out checks your badges. And lo and behold, by skipping Winona's gym specifically, there is special dialogue from Wallace or an Emerald Juan after defeating them, with them telling you one badge remains, reminding you to go back to Fort Tree City. But to pull this off, you have to play through pretty much the last quarter of the game without using Fly, since that requires the Feather Badge. But the fact this dialogue is here at all for such an unlikely scenario is neat. But seeing it is not worth it, you don't want to do late game Hoenn without Fly, trust me. The remakes, though, sadly removed this detail, since there on Route 120 there's an NPC blocking the way until you beat Winona. But like, no, yeah, they were doing us a favor. Black and White 1 have a case where, again, it's not impossible to see technically, but it's so astronomically unlikely that, yeah, no, you're not going to see this unless it's on purpose. So after the first battle with Bianca, Sharon heals your starter, saying your Pokemon needs to be fixed up. But if you somehow, someway, win against Bianca without ever taking any damage, only possible if she just doesn't use Tackle on you, Sharon will note that you, well, didn't take any damage. Though he does still heal you anyway, because as he says, you did use PP, which is unavoidable. And if you somehow don't even use PP, you can't do that, that's illegal. In fact, Black and White has another case like this, which is technically unused content, but not because it isn't in the game. Does that make sense? No. Okay, so once you reach Miss Charlton City at the end of Chargestone Cave, you'll bump into Cedric Juniper, who comments that you've seen a Clink specifically for whatever reason. I get it, those guys are pretty cool. And they're found very commonly in Chargestone Cave, so it's almost guaranteed you did run into one. And even if you didn't through using a repel or something, there's a mandatory battle with Enon here as part of the story where he uses a Clink. So no matter what, you have seen one. However, if you skip the end encounter, which is only possible through cheating, Cedric will have a different line of dialogue taking into account that you haven't seen Clink. It's literally just, you haven't seen a Clink yet, but the fact that this exists at all is so fascinating. Because of how the game simply progresses, you're never able to see this. And it's all the more ironic too, because the fans f***ing hated this thing when the game was new. The Sinnoh games have one that's kind of similar to Sharon's dialogue in a sense. It doesn't necessarily require cheating or playing the game wrong, but it would take so unfathomably long to see legitimately that cheating's probably the best bet here. And coincidentally, it's also found at the very start of the game. When you first get your starter, or steal your starter in Base Diamond and Pearl's case, and later reconvene with Professor Rowan, he'll typically say that the Pokemon looks happy. However, if you somehow evolve your starter before getting to him, meaning you'd be grinding against level 2 Bidoof for probably a couple hours, that line changes to, well, you've made your Pokemon evolve already? And the shock is valid considering, why would you do that? Both the Isle of Armor and Teal Mask have some pretty interesting and weirdly in-depth cases, coincidentally, each involving their mascot legendaries Kubfu and Ogerpon respectively. The Teal Mask is the more basic case of the two, with there being a battle against Carmen after you catch Ogerpon. And since, as she says, this battle is for her to see Ogerpon in action, she flat out refuses to fight you if you don't have it on your team. However, if for whatever reason, you just don't have Ogerpon anymore, whether you release it or it's gathering dust in home, Carmen will notice and express her disappointment, though since there's no alternative, she will offer to fight anyway. Now on the flip side, the Isle of Armor guilt trips you. So training and eventually evolving Kubfu is absolutely required to progress the Isle's story, considering that more or less is the story. Once you do finally get it though, and it's time to start exploring the island and easing Kubfu's anxieties, you could alternatively get rid of it. And if you do, the next time you talk to Mustard, he'll ask if you really want to keep progressing the story despite Kubfu being gone. And it doesn't end there. He continues pressuring you and acknowledging Kubfu's absence through most of the rest of the storyline, in particular when it comes to the Towers of Two Fists. Before you even choose one when he's simply describing them to you, he really urges you to bring Kubfu back, but you still don't have to. Damn good thing you shouldn't give in to his bad influence. When it comes time to actually do the towers, you can do them with any Pokemon now, though the challenge is practically non-existent, not that it existed in the first place. And hell, it goes to the point where the students in the tower don't even talk to you before battle. And by finally reaching the top of the tower, all without Kubfu, Mustard will be shattered, saying, "Even now I see you don't have Kubfu with you. Well, there's nothing for it but to have a Pokemon battle. Period." And even afterwards, he more or less just says, "Good job, let's go home," ending the main part of the storyline on a complete downer. It's straight up giving you the bad ending, your save file's permanently tainted. There are some pretty obscure pieces of dialogue that are only visible when you sequence break too, and not in just some skipping Winona type way. More so by getting to certain places early, sometimes with whole ass NPCs that you'll never run into with their dialogue attached. And this kind of stuff really started in Gen 3, funnily enough all revolving around dive. Well then there must be too much water if it makes the game not work. So in base Ruby and Sapphire, Steven gives you the HM for dive in his house, not long after being required to get into Sutopolis. Trading is also a mechanic in the Pokemon games. I'm sure you see where this is going. If you do happen to skip getting the HM for dive by doing this, there's actually a special failsafe for this scenario during the post-game. When you go back to his house to get the gift Beldum he leaves for you, he'll also include HM08, with the note he leaves you adding a small section saying you should probably take that too. Now in Emerald, the sequence is a little bit different, no doubt thanks to the expansion of the Yaoi in the story. Steven does still give you the HM in his house, but this time it's after a new story event with you battling alongside him at the Moss Deep Space Center. So to keep you from going places where you really shouldn't be yet, the seafloor cavern, you know, leading to Kyogre, has an extra Team Aqua grunt standing in the way of the entrance, reminding you to head back to the Space Center. And surprisingly, it's not just one or two text boxes either. He goes on an entire monologue about Team Magma, saying how your wimpy self would be better suited for them. God damn it, dude, just kiss already. Hell, Platinum has more or less the exact same thing. The sequence break stuff, not the Yaoi. Where the intended way to progress involves you going to Celestic Town, beating Cyrus and getting the HM for Surf to then make your way to Canalave City through Route 218. But not many people would want to interact with a Rick and Morty fan. So if, again, you get traded a Pokemon to help you cross Route 218 early, you'll run into a completely unique roadblock. Some traders battling with their Pokemon's cuteness? Well, contests are a thing, I won't judge. And even Black and White 2 have a super weird one on their very first route, Route 19. In the Unova games, you don't need badges to use HM moves, which is probably because you almost never need to. Like in Black and White 1, the only time an HM is ever required to progress is once with Cut at the very beginning of the game. Thus meaning through, again, trading, you can use field moves to get to some areas exceptionally early. In Route 19's case, that's just a ledge with a couple items and a wall you can walk inside of, the usual. But during your first time on this route, Alder jumps down from that same ledge as part of a cutscene, and somehow doesn't break his legs. So theoretically, you could get right up to him. Except you can't, because before that cutscene plays, there's a youngster up there specifically to prevent you from reaching him, complete with dialogue acknowledging you have surf this early on, calling you surf buddies. But why don't they want you to stand next to Alder so bad? Well, maybe because you can take his belt right off of him! How scandalous. And speaking of, having Pokemon, there's a handful of lines, mainly in one-time cutscenes, that only appear if you do or don't have certain Pokemon in your party, or if your party's just wacky in general. Stuff that's not hard to see, but most people sure won't anyway. In Black and White 2, upon first reaching Victory Road, you'll bump into N. And as he does, he starts talking philosophy. But if you just so happen to have one of his Pokemon on your team at that moment, as in the ones found through the memory link feature or even just the Zorua you're given during the story, he'll throw in an extra line saying, "Aren't you the insert Pokemon species? That helped me that one time? Thank you." It's super sweet, really displaying the bond that N had with these guys, considering he had released them over 2 years ago now. And as for Hilda and Hilbert, no clue where they went. Could someone please go look? Are they okay? The Alola games have a couple small cases, some extremely small, but it's still neat they exist. Some also just slightly altering existing lines rather than adding completely new ones because God knows Sun and Moon didn't need any more dialogue. At the base of Mount Lanakila, you run into Gladion for one final battle. It's a pretty standard fight, and afterwards he compliments you saying you have good Pokemon. But if for some reason your party consists of one single member, the text will correctly change to say you have a good Pokemon. See, he may be a delinquent, but he is still well aware of his grammar. And funnily enough, also on Mount Lanakila, Professor Kukui has one on the complete opposite end of the spectrum. When you first reach the Pokemon League, he makes a small comment about how it was built so high up to honor the legendaries. Alright, pretty cool piece of world building, but But if you have Solgaleo or Lunala with you at that moment, he'll get a little more specific, addressing them directly, saying he hopes they know the league was built in their honor. Pretty simple, but a nice addition nonetheless, really expanding on the already fantastic culture and lore the Alola region has. Sword and Shield has got one too, coincidentally also at the Pokemon League, or at least the equivalent of it. If you happen to bring Eternatus with you to the championship match, he'll notice it sounding almost upset at first, before very quickly changing his tune to excitement, with you being the greatest challenger bringing the most powerful Pokemon. Okay, but like, wouldn't this be horrifying for the crowd? What the hell even is this? You could consider most dialogue tied to event Pokemon to also be pretty obscure and or situational. Mainly down to just how limited these things are. Like, I doubt anyone born after 2012 has seen the amazing Volcanion text dump in X and Y. Also, I just learned this not long ago, but in X and Y, if you just so happen to have a Deontay, which most people don't, there's special dialogue when you get your hair cut. It doesn't even really tell you anything. The lady's husband just says, wow, that is a mythical Pokemon. Just absolutely stunning. Eat your heart out, Sinjo Ruins. When Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire launched, there was a shiny Beldum given out as a mystery gift. But not just any shiny Beldum, Steven's shiny Beldum, which he somehow had. And if you have it with you and decide to talk to, of all people, Mr. Stone of Devon Corporation, he'll take notice of how special it is, even wondering how it would compare to Steven's Beldum. Hell, even in the post-game, if you go to Steven's house to get the free Beldum from him while having his Beldum in your party, the letter he leaves you has an added portion, just saying that he sent it to you and that it's cool, with him adding that both of the Beldum should teach you the joys of Steel-type Pokemon. It's pretty cute. Perrin, specifically when you first meet up with her at Blueberry Academy, has a pretty neat one. Not necessarily needing a certain Pokemon to be in your party, but you do need a Pokemon to be in a certain state. That Mon being the Growlithe she gives you at the end of her side quest during the Teal Mask. Normally, she'll just ask you how it's doing, saying she hopes you put him on your team sometimes and do a bit of adventuring together. But if you've already adventured with it to the point where it's evolved into an Arcanine, she'll be astonished, even having a sweet line talking about her other Growlithe, yours' brother, finally reuniting. It's really cute. I wonder if she knows of the crimes mine's committed. There's also one specific condition across a couple of the games with some super specific dialogue if you manage to fulfill it. That being, filling your PC boxes to the point where you literally cannot get any more Pokemon. Something that you'd likely never do unless you've already completed everything and are a shiny hunter, or maybe you're breeding for competitive, or you could just be a lunatic, that too. This started in Gen 7 with, well, characters having lines for your boxes being full when they're trying to give you gift Pokemon. Pretty standard stuff, but there's some fun ones here. Like in Base Sun and Moon when Gladion tries giving you a type null, he'll be genuinely disappointed in you saying he can't believe you. And heck, even Perrin has another line thanks to this. But specifically, it's before you go fight the Blood Moon Beast, making this one super unique. Where after saying you're ready to go find it, she'll rather ominously note that your Pokemon boxes seem full, and that you should keep some space open just in case. And actually, speaking of, Perrin, the final category, Miscellaneous. Categories were a fucking mistake. During the campout with her when you're taking the photos of Pokemon, she'll not only have a unique line to say for each and every one of them, but she also has some more obscure ones. Like multiple responses to Volbeat and Illumise being photographed at the same time, depending on whether or not you've already photographed one of them. If you take a picture of her Growlithe, she'll call you a sweetie, still loving to see any pictures of it. And she even has a line if you take a photo of her, or rather, 5 lines if you take multiple, each causing her to get more and more flustered. Man, Scarlet and Violet have so much neat dialogue like this, it really makes the world feel that much more immersive and real. The Indigo Disc has a much more well-known case with Crispin during his Elite Trial. At the end of the trial, you're tasked with putting together a sandwich. Pretty standard, especially if you've tried shiny hunting, like, at all. And if you have made sandwiches in Scarlet and Violet before, you should know. Putting the bread on top is a death wish. So just flat out ignoring the bread is usually the best bet, still giving you all the sandwich buffs anyway. And if you pull that same stunt here with Crispin, he'll get really confused, asking if leaving off the top bun is some Paldean thing. Oh, they do know. In Alola, the main gimmick is Z-moves, of course. Super powerful one-time limit breaks that can change the course of a battle in an instant. But what if you just didn't want to use them? During your first battle with Kahuna Hala, if you happen to just not use your Z-move for whatever reason, after the fight, Ilima will comment, being amazed you won without using it. Whereas normally, he'll just call Z-moves lovely. Yeah, man, to each their own. And circling back to the Indigo Disc, Lacey has something similar, with some dialogue after her first battle changing based on whether or not you terrestrialized, with her either admiring how used to it you seem to be, with it being a Paldean staple, or lamenting that she didn't get to see you do it. Steven Stone. Yeah, he has another neat piece of situational dialogue, this time in Heart Gold and Soul Silver. In Kanto, after finishing practically the whole game, beating Red and all that, you can find Steven at Silphco where he offers to trade you a Beldum, big surprise there, for a fortress. Pretty standard stuff. And typically, he would just thank you for showing him a fortress since they aren't very common in Hoenn and leave. But if the fortress you give him just so happens to have its friendship maxed out, he'll notice how much it loved you and start an entire ramble about his own love for steel types, talking about their unique traits and how cool his own metagross is. It's a nice little bit of added character, which hardly anyone would ever see because, like, when he asks for a fortress, would you really give him one you trained, caught, raised, and cared for? A mon that you probably have attachment to? Or one you just caught and evolved in 5 minutes because you wanted to do this trade? Oh yeah, I love my fortress, but, like, I need Steven to tell me what hugging steel types feels like, damn it. Pokestar Studios is already super bizarre, with an absolutely obscene amount of dialogue in the first place, considering almost every one of the 40 movies has multiple dialogue trees with 3 possible endings each. Like, just all the good endings? It's 6 hours and 40 minutes! But there's also some extra obscure dialogue here too. So when doing the movies in Pokestar Studios, you're restricted to using rental Pokemon until you've finished a movie at least once. Afterwards though, you can just use any pre-existing Pokemon with their pre-existing movesets, which is the important bit. In about half of the movies, there's extra dialogue that only plays if you use certain moves during certain scenes. Moves that can only be used if you intentionally bring in a Pokemon that has them. And just calling it extra dialogue is selling it a bit short, because these are wholly new scenes that take place. Like in the first Love and Battles, for example, using Attract on Smeargle activates its mental herb, curing it instantly. And while your love interest questions this at first, they quickly assume that the Attract was meant for them, getting them even more flustered. Some, though, aren't as intuitive, like by bringing Kyurem, Reshiram, or Zekrom with their signature moves into the Giant Woman 3 of all things. Monica will have a unique reaction to getting hit by all of them. Okay, look, Game Freak, I just want to talk, and there's some more fun ones too. Like there being dialogue for using Substitute against the giant Substitute Gatekeeper in Mystery Doors of the Magical Land 2, prompting a short conversation in which both you and it recognize the similarities, somehow leading into talking about the protagonist's missing brother. Or when fighting the Red Fog in the Red Fog of Terror, you can try using Defog, causing Nate or Rosa to remark how even that's not working. Wait, Red Fog? Legends Arceus, considering how different and meaty it is, especially text-wise, surprisingly doesn't have much missable situational dialogue, like, at all. The bulk of it is found in the game's catching tutorial, which is notably pretty extensive, mostly just down to the game's new mechanics, with Akari or Ray chiming in if a Pokemon flees or even if you knock it out. But practically all of the rest of it is from generic NPCs of all things as part of their requests, particularly the ones where they ask you to give them Pokemon. If you just so happen to give them an Alpha though, practically every single time they'll have some extra unique dialogue about it. Most acting surprised, some acting impressed. It's a really neat detail, especially considering lots of this dialogue is tailor-made and actually relevant to the request, with examples like Bryce in Search of a Fiery Pokemon, mentioning how with the power of an Alpha, the fire will burn brighter than anything. Or in the hell that is Big Weasel, Little Weasel, Dorian will note that he didn't even know Weasel could get this big. Man, just you wait until you see Galar. Oh, damn it! See, Pokemon might have too much dialogue sometimes, but that doesn't mean it's all boring text dumps. Look at me, I sound like a damn school teacher. But really, these different acknowledgements to factors and possibilities that to most people would probably never come up are super neat. Not only is it just cool to find something new like this, but it also illustrates such a level of care. No, we're not bringing up Asado Desert again. And while in some cases they should tone it back or at least give us the option to skip, hiding little secrets in there makes it a tiny bit more justified at least. Not justified enough though. Skip! Anyway, check out this cool meme I just made.